Hello and welcome back to the third rail. If you follow the channel, you know that I collect Märklin model trains produced throughout the 1980s. Why the 1980s? Well, there is probably an element of nostalgia at play here, as I was a child in the era. But the 1980s is also a decade where Märklin went through radical changes along with the rest of the model railway industry, and I find these changes very interesting. It is during this decade that Märklin engaged on a path it still follows to this date. Whilst keeping a foot in the toy category, Märklin shifted its focus to producing increasingly detailed products aimed at modelers and collectors. New lines were introduced representing additional railway companies and eras. The average product life cycle was shortened through the increasing release of limited editions, be it single production run series or 1 year only series of single models or box sets. Before 1980, around 10 items were added to the HO product range each year. In 1980, this model went up to 20 and increased to over 50 a year between 1984 and 1989. By 1985, whilst a lot of classics still formed a good portion of the product range, most of them had received updates just in time for the introduction of the digital system Märklin had been working on with lens since 1979. If we look at the train packs or special train sets, as Märklin called them in the catalogues, they were merely a collection of items from the general product range in 1980. By the end of the decade, they were all 1 year only series made with purpose-built items. Märklin engaged on this path with the introduction of Deutsche Reichsbahn rolling stock. Over the years, Märklin had produced a few models based on streamlined locomotives of the Reichsbahn, something it had been doing since the 1930s. By 1970, these items were more novelty items than a part of a coherent product strategy. So was the S36 in Bavarian livery, released under model 3092 in 1974. In both cases, matching cars had never been available in the Märklin program. This was rectified in 1977 when Märklin introduced a few coaches as well as a Deutsche Reichsbahn version of the P8, the 3099. These coaches were not chosen at random, as the same tooling could be reused to produce versions of the same car in different liveries, a common practice in the industry until today. With these minor changes in place, Märklin was not only filling a few gaps, but also became all of a sudden the first company to provide a complete Deutsche Reichsbahn product line. The line was progressively augmented with additional passenger and freight cars. We have seen a few examples of this product range in a running session on the channel back a few weeks ago. I've put a little card at the top right hand corner of the screen if you'd like to have a closer look. And here is the aforementioned Bavarian S36 pulling a few Bavarian coaches issued a year after their DR version in 1978. If Märklin was aiming to be different, they certainly reached this goal in 1984. For the 125th anniversary of the company, Märklin introduced a new series of items themed after the Württemberg stage railways, which had served the region where the company had been operating since its creation in 1869. This was a unique choice at the time, as no other mainstream manufacturer carried models based on this theme. This product line is one of my favorites in the collection. And as it happens, I have just received two examples of the last model I was missing to complete the Württemberg part of the collection. The models represent vinegar transport wagons used by a company called Schweighardt, which was nearly 200 years old at the time the models were issued, and was trading from a town in Württemberg called Tübingen. The prototype the tank wagon is based on is a tank wagon of Prussian construction, which was the type of tank wagons chosen by the Württemberg railways. This new arrival is a good opportunity to take the rest of the Württemberg part of the collection out for a spin, I think. As these cars were produced in 1989 and the last one in the decade I'm interested in, I thought it would be fitting to attach them to the first ever set produced by Märklin in the Württemberg line. This is set number 2857, which was a 125th anniversary special edition produced in 1984. All cars and locomotive are weathered, and they were sold in a grey box like the one you're seeing on screen now, which is the same color scheme as other items that were sold for the 125th anniversary of the company. So I'm going to rail and attach the two vinegar cars. Here's number 1 and number 2. It's a nice little consist. It's actually rather colorful. We're going to send it on its way. We'll see it depart in a few seconds. Off it goes, and I'm going to pull in another Württemberg consist. I think it's going to be another T5 locomotive and a few tank wagons. And indeed, it is. So, the locomotive is a T5 of the same construction as the anniversary set. It was sold also from 1984 onwards as model number 3312. It is pulling a few Olex tank wagons. The dark blue ones were produced between 1985 and 1987. And the light blue ones replaced the dark blue ones in 1987. Both were sold under the same model number, which was 4675. As I need to shift a few things around before sending the consist on its way, Olex was a company that was an early player in the oil business, and it ended up forming BP with a few other companies through the magic of mergers and acquisitions in the 1920s. Right, I'm going to pull in the next victim now, and I think if you follow the channel that you will recognize the locomotive as I have presented it a few months back under the new additions to the collection series of videos I do from time to time. So the locomotive is a T18, which was produced in 1989 under model number 3307. It's pulling a consist with a 4685 closed freight wagon and a few refrigerated beer wagons of the Voie brewery, which was based in Stuttgart. These wagons were produced under model number 4678. Both types of wagons appeared in the original Württemberg product lineup in the 1984 catalogue. And we're going to send this consist on its way as well. I just need to shift a few things around and we're off. And here comes the next consist. So this time we are going to have a type of locomotive we've already seen. It's the locomotive that was sold with the 2857 set that we saw earlier. So I'll concentrate on the freight cars. Here we have a beer wagon Klus, model number 4780, produced in 1987. We then have an open freight wagon, which was produced in 1989 under model number 4795. We then have two DPAG tanker wagons that were part of the original lineup in 1984. They had the model number 4674. They are followed by two additional members of the original Württemberg lineup in 1984. They are model number 4677s. Two beer wagons of the, I'm taking a deep breath here, Württemberg Hohenzollernsche Brauerei Gesellschaft, and the name of the beer is Englischer Garten from the town of Stuttgart. Finally, we have a plain Württemberg freight car, which is a G10 type freight car, model number 4679, which was produced from 1985 onwards. It is equipped with opening sliding doors as opposed to the refrigerated beer wagons. And this is how the packaging looked like. Still the traditional blue boxes in which this type of cars were sold until the 1990s. So we're going to send this consist on its way and pull in the pièces de résistance. If you follow the channel, you most certainly recognize the locomotive pulling this express train. It's a Class C of the Württemberg Railways, model number 3511, produced in 1988. I already did a more in-depth presentation of this model on the channel in one of the new additions to the collection videos. I have added a little card at the top of the screen now, if you'd like to have a closer look if you've not seen it before. The consist behind this locomotive is composed of the most detailed cars Märklin had produced to date. We have the luggage van, reference number 4214, with sliding doors, introduced in 1987. Behind it we find a CI coach, introduced in 1987 under reference number 4211. It's a third-class coach. If we move a bit further, we have a BC coach of second and third class, also introduced in 1987 under model number 4210. We then have a CI coach, which is a third class coach, which was introduced in 1988 under model number 4213. And behind it we'll find a C4 coach of the fourth class, which was introduced in 1988 under model number 4214. It's also the period where Märklin introduced new packaging for its coaches. We are now no longer blue, we are using white with a little see-through window. This consists is an amalgamation of new production techniques and new technologies used by Märklin for the first time. In my opinion, it represents the point in time in Märklin's history where it decided to leave the toy shop for good. So with this last consist, you've now seen one example of each Württemberg model produced by Märklin between 1984 and 1989. I think you'll agree with me in saying that this was quite a busy 5 years for Märklin. I'm still missing some digital versions of two of the models that I've presented, the 3307 and the 3511. Otherwise, this part of the collection is complete. If you've made it that far, thank you very much for your attention. I think it's time to let the trains do the talking, so I'm gonna leave you with a bit of traffic for the next few minutes.